a very good morning to Paul DeBella today. Welcome to the Global Sports Channel. Paul, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
No, you're welcome. And I was just having a little bit of drama here before we got on air with our with the old sailboat. It's a little bit different when you live on a sailboat, Paul. You've got to work out a few logistical things to make sure that we're connected. My mobile phone is actually 17 meters above me on the mast getting the Wi-Fi connection, so that's one of the challenges that we have. But you were actually born in a place that had a lot of challenges as well. I think when it rains up there in Far North Queensland, you get flooded most of the time, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. I originally hail from Ingham in North Queensland, which is 100 kilometres north of Townsville, where I live now. And yeah, we have a wet season from about November through to about February. And where I live, it's susceptible to flooding. So I grew up with that happening every year or every second year, and tropical cyclones. So I'm no stranger to weather events.
Yeah, it's an interesting part of the world. And for those people that are watching and listening around the world today, we're talking about the Far North Queensland part of Australia. You might have heard of Cairns. We're talking about a destination just short of Cairns. Tully and Ingham seem to be on the news a lot when the rain comes in from the Coral Sea there, Paul, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. We often make the news, not necessarily for good news stories, but more so for weather events and damage and flooding and natural disasters. So it's okay. Bad publicity is still publicity, so puts us on the map.
Exactly. You've got to be famous for something. And I'll tell you what, we won't spend too much time talking about the weather today on this show. We're going to be talking a lot about running and coaching because that's your passion and you've had a life so far full of that. Before we go on, though, I'd like you to have the opportunity to dedicate the show to someone special in your life. Who would you like to dedicate your show to today?
I'd like to dedicate the show today to my wife, Sherry. She's very supportive and understanding of my coaching. She's a person who I would like to dedicate the show to and just take an opportunity to thank her for everything that she does for me.
Yeah, brilliant. Wonderful dedication to Sherry, and a shout out to you, Sherry. I hope you have a very Merry Christmas all together. And maybe you can sit down and watch this show together, Paul, as one of your date nights this week.
Yeah, perhaps she might get sick of hearing me talk, though.
Well, I was going to ask you that. Have you done a lot of interviews over the years?
When I was competing, yes. I was able to do a few interviews, particularly when I did well. Coach, as a coach now, later in life, people wish to interview me to talk about my athletes. So I guess I've had opportunities in front of cameras and microphones. So, yeah.
Cool. What's the weirdest question you've ever been asked by somebody interviewing you?
That's an interesting one. When I was younger, I wore a very nice suit and tie as an 11-year-old to a function. And the interviewer was more concerned about what I was wearing as opposed to what I'd achieved athletically. So I made a bit of a statement with my my outfit, and he said I was the best dressed athlete that he'd ever seen. And I said, well, I was told to wear a jacket and a tie.
Well, that's pretty good for an 11-year-old. Did you keep wearing the suit for a while?
No, it actually was a rental, that suit. So I wore it once and never again after that comment.
Well, I hope to ask you a couple of things today that you've never been asked before in an interview. So I'm going to challenge myself on that one. You can tell me whether I cracked the code or not, okay?
Yeah, for sure. Let's see how you go.
Okay, let's start off with this one. What's your horoscope sign? Have you ever been asked that before?
I haven't, actually. I haven't even asked what my horoscope is. I'm an Aquarius. I'm born in February. Not sure what that means, but yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm an Aquarian as well. So I probably know more about you already than you think you do, yeah? So nothing wrong with Aquarians. We have big dreams, and the good thing about Aquarians is we usually go on to actually achieve our dreams. So that's sometimes a difference between us and other star signs. So there you go. You're an Aquarian. Well, good on you. And I think if I remember right on doing my research, you've got a birthday coming up in early February. Is that right?
Yeah, I do. Early February, 12th of February, I yeah, I'll celebrate my 44th birthday, which is
Fantastic.
quite scary to think of it like that.
Okay, we won't talk about age anymore. Actually, let's go back to the other end of the spectrum when you're a young tacker growing up there in Ingham and all the rest of it, and particularly around sport. When you were at school in the early years, was sport a big thing for you? Were you falling in love with running straight away, or were you playing a bit of everything?
I was one of those kids that just enjoyed playing sport at school. I enjoyed all different types of sports. I tried everything, and discovered quite early, probably from the age of 7 or 8, that I was quite fast. Whether it be soccer or cricket or rugby league, I used to be fast. They used to put me in positions where I was able to utilise my speed. And I was part of the Herbert River Athletics Club in North Queensland, and yeah, won a few races as a junior, and everything, I guess, went from there.
So is it one of those things that you're born with a talent like being a fast runner, or is this something that's come from your parents as an example, or somebody else in the family?
Yeah, I had an uncle who was very fast in his junior days, and also my father was fast as well. Unfortunately, they didn't have opportunities to pursue their sport back in the day, and I was extremely fortunate to have parents who were very supportive of my aspirations in sport, and then supported me right through to the elite level eventually.
So let's talk about the journey, because for a lot of people out there listening, it's always interesting to hear about how you go from being such a small environment as you were when you grew up to getting to an Olympic standard. So when you first started off, obviously you're in a club. Did you start running the sprint distances straight away, or did you have a go at some other races?
Primarily in athletics, I enjoyed long jump. I was state record holder in long jump. I still have a Pacific School Games record, an Australian record in the long jump for an 11-year-old. So
Okay.
I loved the long jump when I was younger, and obviously in order to jump far, you have to run fast. So they sort of worked hand in hand. But my great passion in the beginning when I started athletics was the horizontal jumps. And I obviously still dabbled in the sprints, etc., but I wasn't the best as a junior in the sprints. So as the years went on, I went through school, sport, and did athletics right up until the age of 17. And from there, I was able to be identified by the Queensland Academy of Sport under their talent identification program as a potential scholarship holder for sprinting and long jump. So that's how I guess it started.
Yeah, it must be difficult, first of all, when you're growing up in a remote area like you were, and then secondly, when you've got mainstream sports like rugby league, I guess, and those others. Was there a push at all at any time for you to take on those other sports? Was, that an option as well?
Yeah, definitely. As some people know, that North Queensland is the heartland of rugby league, and I guess there was a push when I was younger to be able to play rugby league just like my friends were playing. So I did dabble. I played a little bit, but it was one of those sports where I wasn't the biggest child, and it meant probably playing for only a short time because it meant that I was going to get hurt.
Right.
But, I pursued athletics. I was in the athletics club and continued it through school, and found out that I was actually quite good at it when I went and competed against the other students and children in the state. So I guess that's how it started.
So when did you start taking things seriously from a training point of view?
Well, in North Queensland, I only used to train twice a week with a local coach in Ingham. And it wasn't until I was the age of probably 17 or 18 where I relocated to Brisbane to receive that Queensland Academy of Sports scholarship that I began training full time. And that was very different for me because I'd come from 2 days a week to then training 6 days a week, twice a day. So in the beginning, when I went to Brisbane, I thought that everything would catapult from there, that I would improve, and the performances would get better. It just so happened that my performances got worse when I went to Brisbane because my body wasn't used to the workload that was put on me. So for 2 or 3 years, I didn't run a personal best time, and I didn't jump a personal best distance in the long jump. So I'm questioning the move. I'm questioning all the decisions that I had made post high school. But my coach at the time, Cliff Mallett, assured me that in order to go forwards, you have to go backwards 2 steps in order to become forwards one. So I stuck at it, and I guess he was correct in the end, because the rest is history, and I was able to represent Australia on numerous occasions in sprinting.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, for a lot of people that are listening today, they'd be interested to hear a little bit more about that transition away from your hometown and going to the big city of Brisbane. There's a lot of things involved in the complexity of moving city to live, isn't there? You're away from friends and families. You've got to make new friends. You're in a new environment, especially when it comes to the training, as you've just explained. And in your case, you took a few steps backwards. Tell us how the emotional side of that was for you, and how difficult was it to struggle through those early times?
Yeah, that's an extremely difficult transition. I'm a teenager moving to a big city, something that I was definitely not used to. My eyes were wide open, looking at everything around, and I was sacrificing, leaving my family, my younger sister, my friends, everything that I'd ever known, to pursue a dream and a goal that I wasn't sure that would even work. So taking a very big risk, I guess, and a big gamble on something where there's no guarantee. So I was very fortunate to have a coach at the time, Cliff, who was a father figure to me. He was very supportive in that transition, very understanding, and also very supportive parents who sort of understood that it was very hard and were able to support me both financially and emotionally.
Yeah, brilliant. Was there a plan B while you're at school? Did you have a dream to become a lawyer, a doctor, or an astronaut?
I actually did some work experience in high school as a journalist.
Right. Okay.
I wanted to be a sports journalist originally, but I guess I was able to do that job on the other side of the microphone as an athlete. So, and I guess that dream sort of dwindled a little bit. I also had some passions about sports management. I enjoyed following different sports and looking at all the elite athletes of the world, and wondered how it would be to be involved with supporting and helping them as well. So that was something that I thought about once upon a time, and didn't come to fruition.
Who were some of your sporting icons back in the day when you were having these kinds of thoughts? Were there people on the global stage that you kind of looked up to and thought, wow, I revere that person?
No, not necessarily. Probably in track and field more so. I had people that I looked up to, idols, I guess. The first Olympic Games that I followed was the 1988 Seoul Olympics and the battle between Ben Johnson and Carl Lewis. And I enjoyed that rivalry. I enjoyed watching the spectacle that was that Olympic Games, not just the performance of the world record, but also the scandal post 100-meter final. That was all interesting to me. And I guess from that moment, I sort of aspired to be a sportsman and to sort of follow in those people's footsteps. It wasn't until 1992 when the president of the International Olympic Committee, Juan Antonio Samaranch, said his famous words, "And the winner is Sydney," where it just sparked something within for me to say that I want to be an Olympian and represent my country in Sydney in front of a global audience. So that was when I guess it first ignited for me, and where I wanted to pursue the sport of athletics.
So when did it become apparent that you were going to really be dedicated to the sprint distances, and that's what you were going to focus on?
Yeah, like I said before, I originally wanted to be a long jumper, and I was doing very well in long jump. It just so happened that I got injured at the age of 18 in long jump with my ankle, and my coach said to me, let's do some sprinting, go away from jumping for a while just to give your ankle a bit of a rest. Let's do some sprinting to see if we can get that technically correct, and then we can always go back to long jump when you're a little bit stronger, etc. It just so happened that sprinting took off, and I just started doing really well, and 14 years later, I'm an Australian representative in 2 Olympics and a few World Championships and Commonwealth Games. So I guess that aspiration of being a long jumper sort of slipped through my fingers a little bit. It wasn't until my very last year before I retired that I went back and did a little bit of long jump just to see how I'd go. And it just so happened that I had more injuries in that year than I've ever had in my entire running career. So probably meant to be. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known where I could have gone with sprinting.
Now, when we talk about sprinting, we typically talking about the fastest men in the world not being of the white colour. And I had Michael Frater on the show a couple of weeks ago, and we're having a bit of a joke about this. And he said that he used to always have a smile on his face when he lined up against a few white boys on the starting blocks, because he thought he was for a good chance to be able to beat them. So tell us about that. Is when you're a white guy and you're trying to run 100 meters, what's the psychological barriers you've got to overcome? Is it first of all that 10-second barrier? Is that the goal for every sprinter when they first start off in a serious capacity?
Yeah, I mean, the goal when you're a sprinter is just to try and get to that finish line as fast as possible and be the quickest that you can possibly be on any given day. Now, I'm not sure whether genetics or race has anything to do with it. I've actually beaten a lot of African American athletes in the past and athletes of colour, and I'm not sure whether that's something that gives them a distinct advantage or not. However, historically, as you've seen, most Olympic finals and World Championship finals are of athletes who have darker skin. So I'm not sure whether there's something in that or not. However, I didn't really think about that when I was an athlete. I just sort of went out there to try and run as fast as I possibly could, try and block out those external factors of other athletes, etc., and try to be the best I can be, I guess, on any given day.
Mm. So when you transitioned away from the long jump and started to dedicate yourself more to the sprint distances, how long did it take for you to see really upward progression in terms of your times? And we should be talking about downward progression when we're talking about times. How long did it take for you to start to seeing noticeable, improvements?
Well, I finished high school in 1994 and I made the World Junior Championships in the 4x100 metre relay in 1996. So it was 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Where I was able to make an impression in sprinting. I still wasn't the best in the country. I came fourth in the under-20 national championships, enough to make a relay team, but it wasn't enough to become the best sprinter in the country for that age. But I guess things progressed from there. In 97, I made, again, an open World Championship relay where I was actually a reserve. I went all the way to Athens to not compete. I was essentially the person who would be there to support the other athletes and carry their bags. And 98, I didn't make the Commonwealth Games. I recall that I felt like my life was coming to an end because I'd done well in 2 previous years. And then 1998, I didn't qualify for the Commonwealth Games in Kuala Lumpur. So I thought, I was questioning a few things. I was wondering what was happening. And I think that's where that what my coach was talking about, in order to go forwards, you had to go backwards 2 steps. And that was a year where I was able to put in some significant work to make sure that not making that team never happened again.
Yeah.
So, and then from there, I went on to make 99 World Championships in Seville, the Pinnacle, 2000 Olympic Games, World Championships 01, Commonwealth Games 02, World Championships 03, and then culminated with another Olympic Games at 04 in Athens.
So what happened? Why weren't you selected for that team to go to KL?
The national, I do recall the national championships was a bad experience for me because there was like a really terrible weather, like really big headwinds, and I'm not the biggest sprinter that was around at that particular time. As a teenager, I think I was still maturing and growing physically, and with big headwinds, it meant that I was considerably disadvantaged. I couldn't really run too well into big headwinds, and those athletes who were stronger and bigger than me were able to push through it and come through in front. So I didn't qualify at the trials. Didn't even make the final, actually. So I thought, like I said, I thought my world was coming to an end. I was thinking to myself, what am I doing wrong? Something's not happening right. But yeah, I had a coach who was from Tasmania once tell me, just because God delays doesn't mean God denies. So, and I remember that to this moment about his justification of not being selected in that team. So, and I made sure that from that point, I wasn't going to miss another major championship.
When was the first time you represented Australia overseas?
Probably in 1994, my last year of high school. I competed in the Oceania Championships in Auckland.
Yeah.
I went to Auckland as a long jumper, and I remember winning the under-20 long jump in Auckland. It was my first international experience wearing the green and gold. And I do remember standing on the dais and the Australian national anthem playing in my honour. So that was a big buzz for me, and definitely cemented the fact that I wanted to be a track and field athlete.
So how was it representing your country for the first time? There must have been a lot of pride associated with that. Do you remember the day you kind of got the phone call to say you're on the team and you're going to be off?
Yeah, I was still in high school, and my parents were concerned that I was going to miss too much school at the time. So, but I ended up going on the team. Lucky that I did, and I was able to, get that big buzz. I just don't think that when you're young like that, you understand the enormity of an achievement. You know, you take things in your stride, and things just happen, and then it's not until later in life when you look back on it and you go, "That wasn't too bad." I was pretty good, and as a teenager, you look at some teenagers these days, and in comparison, you think to yourself, "Wow, that was a good achievement," and I should probably pat myself on the back for that.
Now, I've been to one of the Olympic Games that you were at, and it wasn't the one you're probably thinking it was in terms of Sydney. I was actually in Greece and got to see all the Olympics there. That was quite a phenomenal Olympic Games and environment. How did you enjoy the Greece environment versus being out of your own country after 2000?
Yeah, Athens was very special. It was where the Olympic Games originated in Athens in 1896. So being able to compete in two Olympic Games, one in your home country and the other Olympic Games where it originated was like I said, really special. Sydney was more about the achievement of qualifying for the team. Athens was more about business. Unfortunately, 4 years earlier in Sydney, the Australian 4x100 metre relay team was disqualified in the semi-final, and after being told that we were in the Olympic final. So in Athens, it was a chance for us to prove that first time we should have been there. So, and it just so happened that in Athens, we were the first Australian 4x100 metre relay team to ever make that Olympic final. And for me, it was special because I was a part of a history-making relay team.
Yeah, brilliant. Did you prefer running solo or within the team environment? Because you did a lot of relay running, so there must have been a lot of camaraderie with your mates in the relay team.
Yeah, when you become a track and field athlete, it's a very individual sport, and you obviously do it because you're good at a particular event. But I must admit, I did enjoy coming together as a relay and having that team environment around us. It was an opportunity to share your experience with others, to really sort of get to know your fellow athlete as well, and to go into battle against other countries of the world. So I guess I enjoyed both aspects of being a track and field athlete, the fact that you're an individual sprinter, and also coming together as a relay athlete to share the experience with others.
Yeah, it's a fairly unique experience when you think about it, that not many athletes get to double up in their discipline at Olympic Games. I guess tennis is another example where you can play doubles as well as the singles, but being in that team environment, how different is it from a training perspective? What sort of regimes do you have to go through as part of the relay team that obviously you don't go through as a solo runner?
Well, when you're selected as part of a relay, there's certain commitments that you have in terms of relay camps and gatherings that you have to come together as individual sprinters and work together. And that happened not just in Australia, but overseas. And we would spend many of our training sessions drilling relay passes and working out check marks in order to when to leave, etc. So there was a lot that had to go into it. It's a very technical event. As you know, that if you make a mistake in a relay, it's a team mistake. It's not necessarily an individual mistake, which some people sometimes get a little bit confused with, because you're putting your faith in other people to get a result, which is an interesting concept. You train all these years to sort of have your destiny in somebody else's hands. But we trained really hard. We did a lot of changes prior to both Olympic Games and World Championships, and where we had to really communicate with one another. We had to work together. We had to put our differences aside in regards to us being individuals and have individual aspirations in regards to the 100 and 200. And I guess coming together was showed a different side of both myself and the athletes.
Who gets to choose what position you run within the relay team?
Certain athletes within the team have different strengths, I guess. Some people are probably better starters or better bend runners, straight runners. Some people have the ability to hold the baton in both left and right hands. So I guess at the end, the relay, as much as they say, oh, it should be the four fastest athletes, it probably should be the four best relay athletes, in my opinion. The athletes who can actually get the job done, get the baton to the finish line, and do it safely. Because as we know with some of the Americans in the past and some other countries, the four fastest athletes are not necessarily the best athletes to get the baton to the finish line. They come into some sort of mistakes, or something happens in regards to that speed coming into the exchange zones. And I think that Australia has a distinct advantage because according to some of the other teams in the world, Australia is one of the best relay nations in the world in regards to their skills. So that's, I guess, a really good honour to have. But I think, the coach has obviously a big say in who runs where, etc. But I think sometimes the relay does select itself in regards to common sense and also ability levels.
What position did you used to run in the relay team?
I used to run the back straight in the relay. So I'd receive the baton off the starter, run with the baton in my left hand. And part of the reason why I was selected in the back straight is where I was able to maintain my top speed quite well down the back straight, because it's about 110 metres approximately. So not only do you have to run 100 metres, you have to run through the exchange zones as well, which add that extra distance to the leg. And I guess I'd had proven results in the past where I was able to, be safe passing and receiving and passing the baton in my left hand.
And what about the 100 and 200? Did you have a preference of which one was your favourite out of those two? Did you like running the bend more or just the straight out?
Probably definitely the 100. One, because it was shorter. Considered the blue ribbon event. It was like the event that everyone would stop and watch. It was an exciting feeling when you do the 100. I did enjoy running bends, however, the 200 I guess it was just too much work coming from a long background.
Yeah, right. Hey, it's time for another question I've got that I don't think you've ever been asked before. So let's see if I can nail another one. What's been your favourite snack food when you've been travelling overseas? Have you been asked that? Have you been asked that before?
Haven't been asked that question.
Okay,
that's a good one. Favourite snack food when travelling? I'm not sure if it's my favourite, but it was a food that was definitely forced upon me. Baked beans.
Baked beans?
In fact, I wasn't a very wealthy athlete, and I was on rations a lot of the time. And I do remember packing my bag to travel overseas and putting baked beans in my luggage because it was a cheaper meal. It had heaps of protein. And it was just one of those things that I got used to having. I don't necessarily like baked beans, to be honest, but it was one of those things that I just ended up eating.
There you go. That's probably a little bit of a tidbit that people around the world didn't know about Paul de Bella before today, that you used to carry baked beans with you when you travel around the world.
And to be honest, I didn't even think about it until now.
There you go. World exclusive right here on the Global Sports Channel, folks. Okay, back to running. And as you've mentioned, you've spent a lot of your time running in all sorts of places around the world. And as we know, there's some fantastic stadiums and venues that you get to ply your trade in. Has there been a couple that have really stood out in terms of amazing tracks and places that you really felt as though this is a great place to run?
Yeah, big buzz for me was running at Stade de France in Paris, World Athletics Championships in 2003. I do remember taking a moment before I went out to the relay to really understand the enormity of where I was and what I was about to do. The crowd had 100,000 people there, and it was a fantastic atmosphere going out to the track. In saying that, there's been a lot of tracks. There's obviously Stadium Australia at the Olympic Games at 10 a.m. in the morning when I was about to line up for the 100-metre heats. There was 110,000 people there. About to cheer me on in the 100 metres. So that was a massive buzz. And I guess also Athens as well, the 2004 Olympic Games, where the stadium was again full. And yeah, all the Greeks came out to support their athletes.
So, as far as your career went in terms of, and let's talk about the 100 metres specifically and the times that you were running, when did you reach your peak in the 100 metres?
It just so happened that I ran my fastest time when I was 23, but there are people who say that, like late 20s is when you sort of peak, mid to late 20s. It's different for everyone. It all depends on the situation, the environment, the races that you're in, the opportunities that you've been given, about when that fastest time is going to come out of you. I feel that I probably ran my best prior to the Sydney Olympics, because I knew that I had everything to gain from running my best possible race. High pressure. There was a lot of pressure on that because I left it literally till the last minute to qualify for the Sydney Olympics. I'd run 10:26, which is my personal best, a few times in Darwin, but the wind gauge wasn't favourable. It was always a wind-assisted time, and then went to Stadium Australia prior to the Olympics and ran 10:26 into a headwind. So one of those things, I just think that in high-pressure situations, it really can bring the best out of you. And the human body is an amazing thing where you can actually do things that you just never thought you were capable of under high pressure.
We're seeing throughout all different sports around the world these days that athletes are able to prolong their careers. So we look at people like Roger Federer in tennis. In your discipline, you've got people like Justin Gatlin that are still going around. What do you think about that? Do you think there's a possibility these days, because of training, science, technology, that athletes can go on to older age?
Yeah, definitely. I think that athletes can go as long as they wish. It's not necessarily a physical thing sometimes. It's more of a financial decision that athletes tend to end up retiring. I mean, those athletes that you mentioned are, the best athletes in their disciplines, and therefore are able to financially support themselves and continue training, pay the best physios and coaches, etc., to help support them on that journey. I believe in my situation, it was more about what am I going to do next in life. I'd achieved 2 Olympic Games. I felt that I'd got everything out of myself that I possibly could have, and it was just, I felt like the right time to be able to sort of step aside. No doubt, had I had given the support and was able to financially support myself, that I was able to continue for years to come. No doubt.
Look, I find that whole end of career conversation quite interesting, and I want to go into a little bit of that right now with you, because a lot of athletes don't put too much thought into what they're going to do after they're competing. I was just talking to somebody yesterday, actually, and they said to me, I had no dreams or aspirations outside of doing my sport, and they actually fell in a pretty dark hole, and it was a pretty moving interview after I heard about some of the depression and all the things that happened. So did you have plans? Did you start to make a roadmap for yourself at the end of your career, or knew where you were going?
I had the thought through my whole career, where what am I going to do when this is all finished? And it's a very daunting thought, because you dedicate your entire life to one thing, and you think to yourself, how am I going to do something different? How am I going to put my efforts into another discipline and be as successful as I am now? Because you have high expectations. You set dreams and goals for yourself, and you're always working hard to achieve them, and you just don't know what else can give you that fulfillment like I felt. That self-satisfaction of competing in front of 110,000 people. Like, how am I going to replicate that in something else in my life? And that thought used to go through my mind quite often. And I'll admit, I did go through post-Olympic blues after 2000 and 2004. Like, now what? Now what do I have to look forward to? Do I have to train for another 4 years to feel this again? Or do I put my efforts into something else? And I can see how athletes can suffer from mental illness post-sport. Some during sport, because they get those feelings of, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And it just so happened that I was very fortunate while I was still training through the Queensland Academy of Sport, where they offered me opportunities to go into schools and do coaching clinics, and be a guest speaker to talk about my Olympic experience. And I felt that was the natural progression for me to actually pursue giving back to the next generation. And what ended up happening is in the last 4 years of my athletics career, went to university and studied education. And now I'm an actual high school teacher in North Queensland, where I feel the reason I wanted to do that was so I can motivate and inspire the next generation to achieve dreams and goals. Now, that doesn't necessarily work for every kid that you teach, because there's a lot of kids who there is no gratitude for what you're trying to do for them. However, there is a few people that you end up touching that they remember what you did for them for the rest of your life.
So on that journey away from athletics, it must be a fairly daunting task as well when it comes to your daily routine, because you're so structured when you're in that training world, right? You get up every day, you've got a training program that you go to, you've got a coach that, as you've mentioned, sometimes is even like a father figure that's supporting you through that process. I'm assuming at the end of the career, you've got to kind of find your own way on a day-to-day routine as well. Is that something that is difficult?
Yeah, definitely. Your whole career is all structured. You have a training program, where you have to be at what time. You've got people telling you what to do constantly. And then one day you become your own boss and you don't know how to deal with that. People just don't know how to stand on their own 2 feet.
Yep.
So I think it's important that when you are coaching, particularly these days, that I coach in a way where I'm not giving direct instruction all the time. That I'm actually trying to let my athletes and my students think for themselves, where I ask them probing questions, I guess, where they have to actually think about what they're going to do for themselves. For example, when I'm coaching, instead of me giving a direct instruction to one of my athletes, I'll get another one of my athletes to go and give them the same instruction, but it's coming out of a different mouth.
Right.
So, and that's very powerful because, you're hearing the same message from somebody different. Now, I also give my athletes homework. I give them things to think about and to come back to me and sort of say, well, what do you think? And I think it's really good to sort of detach and take a step backwards sometimes, where you let your athletes really think for themselves. Because when they post-sport, that's what they're going to have to do.
Yeah, brilliant. We're going to talk a bit about your coaching career and how things are going there at the moment. But before we get there, I just wanted to kind of have a retrospective conversation around your career in terms of looking back on your career. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. Would you have done anything different in your career journey itself, moving from Ingham down to Brisbane, going for that goal of the Olympics and that? Would you have done anything in a different way to change results or anything like that?
It's one of those things, you can't change the past. And it's one of those things, I don't think that I would change anything, to be honest. I actually exceeded all my expectations in sport. My dreams and goals in the beginning was to represent Australia once. I ended up representing my country on multiple occasions at the pinnacle of sport, and did it consistently over many years. So in order for me to go back and say, would I change anything? Absolutely not. Because I did get everything out of myself. I was able to achieve more than what I set out to achieve originally. And in hindsight, everything just worked out exactly how I wanted it to work out, which I was extremely fortunate to have it work like that. So, that's one of those things that I tend to not look too much in the past. I tend to sort of focus on the now and the future, but to look back and I think that I need to acknowledge a little bit more about my own achievement, the enormity of what I did, and sort of acknowledge it with myself. Because when I look at who's trying to achieve the same things these days, it's very hard. And I must have been working pretty hard to be able to achieve what I did back then.
Yeah, that's a good thing to hear, and I think it's something that's fairly consistent across society, as we don't celebrate our own milestones probably enough in our life journey, and also recognizing the important steps that you have taken as a human being. And I wanted to ask you that, in terms of your 14-year career, what did you learn about yourself the most during that journey?
I definitely learned that I'm resilient. I was a very mentally tough athlete where I didn't sort of let too many external factors impact me. I'm not sure if that was because of my upbringing and where I was a bit sheltered and away from all the politics of sport, But when there were politics in sport, I was able to deal with those situations quite well and focus on the controllable as opposed to things that I had no control over. So, and it was good that my coach was a psychologist as well, because he really was able to put things into perspective for me, to help me concentrate on the things that were important as opposed to things that were irrelevant. So, and I believe that actually helped me become a better athlete, and not just an athlete, a better person later in life.
Yeah, great points. And I think also what's important too, and you just touched on it, in terms of today, we see that a lot of athletes have a variety of support mechanisms in place to help them, don't they? You know, back in the day, if we go back 30 or 40 years, it was just, you're lucky to have a coach. These days, you have a psychiatrist, you have a recovery team, you have even statisticians are following some of these top athletes around as well. How much of a difference does that make, having a complete support network, not only training you, but also traveling with you and being part of a team?
It's interesting you say that, actually, because back in the day when you didn't have that support, you tended to work harder, and you knew that whatever you did was on you, that the only person was responsible for any mistakes that may have been made was yourself. These days, it's great to have that support and those networks around you. However, I think it takes away the ability for athletes to problem solve, for decision making, and thinking for themselves. Because I think it's really important that people have that killer instinct and that motivation, that drive to achieve something for themselves. And having that big entourage around you, as much as it makes life more convenient and easier, I think it takes away a little bit about that competitive edge. Because there are athletes in the past that I can look back on, even the generation before mine, where they worked extremely hard, and everything that they achieved was because of what they put in, not necessarily what others around them contributed to helping. So, look, I'm on the fence a little bit. I think that these days, when you have all that support networks around you, it's fantastic. Makes life easier. It can take athletes to another level, but I think sometimes it can also disadvantage some athletes, because it takes away that ability to be able to, I guess, be yourself and realize why you're doing the sport in the first place.
Yeah, really, really good point. And as I said earlier in the show, I had another Olympic sprinter on my show recently, and he was talking exactly about the same thing. And he's actually started a training academy where he's focused on getting the hunger back into these young kids that he feels that they've lost. And there's too much of the entitlement culture going on, and I think that's what maybe you're alluding to a little bit too as well.
Yeah, definitely. As a school teacher, you do see a sense of entitlement with kids these days. And they grow up with that sense of entitlement. And I'm not sure if it's because of the world that we live in today, with technology, that we're all connected so easily. I'm not really sure about the reason. However, I do believe that we do need to get back that competitive edge, that hunger, that desire to achieve things for yourself, not necessarily for other people.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to instill in my athletes a little bit. It's very hard. It's very hard because you have to go with societal norms. Obviously we're on technology now, whereas once upon a time I'd do an interview face to face. However, yeah, that sense of entitlement is definitely a real thing in today's society.
Yeah. So let's talk about your coaching now. And you've got a squad, as you mentioned before. When did you step into the coaching frame, and how long have you been doing it for now?
Yeah, I retired from track and field myself in 2008, and since then I've actually started coaching. And the way it started was I started doing some coaching in a high school, a private high school in Brisbane, and I did that for a few years side by side with my own coach. He had his own kids at the school, so I was able to contribute, helping some of the students, and then things just evolved from there, where I was able to actually do some more one-on-one coaching with some private athletes, until eventually it turned into my own training squad. And that training squad then relocated from Brisbane to then Townsville, where I've had to actually recruit new athletes along the way. And some of the athletes from Brisbane actually followed me to Townsville. I coached right from the very beginning. I coached two twins, Andrew and Josh McCabe, and one of those boys ended up going on to the Olympic Games, Andrew, in 2012 and was able to actually do exactly what I did back in 2004 and make the Olympic final. He actually ran on the third leg of the relay against Johan Blake, so he's definitely achieved special things as well.
Brilliant. Let's talk about coaching in Australia. And, you've seen a lot of exposure to athletics around the world during your career. Are the young kids in this country, are they disadvantaged at all by being in Australia and so far away from global competition?
Yeah, track and field is a summer sport in Australia, and it's a winter sport internationally for us. So when we have to program for athletes to be doing well against the other countries of the world, we have to double periodise our athletes, because most of the time our selection trials and our national championships happen at the end of our summer season. And then we have to go back into a little bit of work and then try and get them to peak again for perhaps July or August for an international season. So we're disadvantaged in terms of our location. It always has been like that, with Australia having a different climate to Europe, I guess, the opposite climate, but also our access to other competitions, and particularly high-level competitions. Most of the big Diamond League competitions are held in Europe and other areas of the world, and we need to travel a considerable distance to be able to participate.
So how do you overcome those things in terms of, there must be a psychological challenge as well, because, the young kids will be seeing all these other sprinters, particularly, and I'm thinking about the US with the NCAA championships and all the opportunities that they have in those kinds of places. Is there a desire from many of the young Australians to actually go and be based overseas and get training overseas?
Yeah, some athletes have taken up opportunities to go to the United States to take up scholarships in colleges, etc. And I guess while they're there, they have the opportunity to compete in the NCAA championships and also the college competitions. However, those students who decide to stay in Australia, or those athletes, they then, I guess, are disadvantaged a little bit, because we don't have a college system in this country like overseas does. We have a domestic season where our national governing body, Athletics Australia, put on a series of competitions, and that seems to be getting less and less over the years. And the reason being for that is probably financial. It's very hard to run competitions in this country, and track and field is not one of the high-profile sports in this country. We don't get prime-time television like your rugby leagues and your AFLs. So in order for us to be exposed to high-level competition and that environment where track and field is very important, we do need to be elsewhere. And the hub for track and field is definitely Europe. And there have been athletes in the past who do go across to Europe and do a circuit and compete in some competitions. However, that does come at an expense. Unless you've got private sponsors or you're at a particular level where you can get funding, it's extremely difficult to be able to access those competitions and be able to get a lane in those races.
Now, as a coach, one of the things that I'm interested to know is, you got your kids doing stuff that you didn't like to do in training? Have you kind of passed down some of those traits? Sometimes. There are some sessions that you actually prescribe to your athletes that you think, oh, wow, I used to hate doing this myself, but I understand that it's a necessary evil in order to achieve goals and dreams. And as a coach, I think you get a little bit of a sick satisfaction looking at them suffer, like I had to suffer. But the climate in North Queensland is very humid, so that I guess also dictates what sort of sessions you prescribe. You can't do the volume that you would be able to do elsewhere because of the humidity here. So I have to adapt my sessions. It might look good on paper, but not necessarily in a practical sense. Now, I was talking to one of your students before the show because I wanted to get some dirt on you as a coach. So I asked them to give me something to ask you and to see what your response would be. So I'm going to tell you what they told me, and then I'm going to tell you what they thought your response was going to be, and we'll see whether they were right. Yeah. So this particular student of yours told me that he's got a faster PB than you, over 100 meters, and he said your response was going to be that, yeah, but he hasn't been to 2 Olympic Games yet. And that's the logical response, isn't it? So he was right. There's a lot of people who have run faster times than I have and haven't been representing their country at 2 Olympics. So
Yeah, I just keep reminding him and bring him back down a peg. That yeah, he ran a fast time, but yeah, until you represent your country in front of a global stage running that time, then yeah, I guess I got that over him.
Fair enough. Yeah, walk the talk, not just talk the talk, right?
That's right.
So tell us about what you love about coaching at the moment. What are some of the great things that really inspire you to get out of bed every day and go and help these kids?
I just have a passion for the sport. I enjoy giving back. Like I said, the reason why I wanted to become a school teacher before was to motivate and inspire, and it's no different with my coaching. I enjoy helping others, the journey. Coaching is definitely one of those professions where you see results instantly. It's one that where you sort of see results over time, and you're watching people grow, not just as an athlete, but as a person. And coaching's not hard in the way that it's just about nurturing. It's just about being accountable and turning up. You know, some coaches feel like they have to have special training sessions to be considered a good coach. It's not necessarily the truth. You just have to be out there and try and provide sessions that are realistic for the athletes that you coach, and be there in support and to sort of, like I said, nurture the talent that they have.
Brilliant. And what are a couple of pieces of advice that you'd give to any kids watching or listening to us today who are starting off on an athletic journey, a bit like you did back in the day? What advice would you give them right now as to how to go about it?
This is definitely one question I have been asked in the past. My advice to kids these days is to never lose sight of the bigger picture and your dreams and goals, because some aspiring athletes these days don't think it's realistic for them to be able to achieve what others have done. They just the road or the path just seems really unclear. They just don't know how they're going to get there. But what I've learned in this sport is that one door opens to another door opens to another, and opportunities present themselves. And they have to persist. They have to be dedicated and like I said, not lose sight of that bigger picture, because this sport can provide you with an amazing feeling of self-satisfaction when you get to that pinnacle of sport. And you can get that satisfaction from not achieving the pinnacle of sport, because you know the lessons that you learn through sport, sometimes you can't learn those in a textbook.
Yep.
You know, it's the interactions that you have with other people, the social connections, the fact that you're fit, healthy. I mean, my father used to always say to me, if you're fit and you're healthy, you're rich. And I feel that that's a really good message to pass on. It's just to really try and keep striving towards your dreams and goals, and you may be surprised about what you can achieve.
Yeah, brilliant pieces of advice there indeed. Okay, here's my third question that you've never been asked before. That's my last one as far as those ones go. What running shoe did you used to put on first?
As in left or right?
Left or right, yeah.
I'm just trying to think about how I put my shoes on now. I think I put my left shoe on first. I wasn't very superstitious in that regard. I don't think that was something that made me run faster or not. It was just, I think I put my left shoe on first.
Okay.
Yeah, and my left spike when I used to compete. So I think that rings a bell.
So I'm assuming you hadn't been asked that one before either.
I haven't. I've been asked that. You're doing well today.
It's 3 for 3. Okay, I'll better stop while I'm ahead. COVID-19 has curtailed a lot of plans for a lot of people around the world this year, in particular athletics and the Olympic Games in Tokyo. How difficult has it been in terms of realigning schedules and emotional, physical, all the training associated with peaking for a big games like that? How difficult has that been this year?
Yeah, everything had to be reorganised. COVID has just left everyone, I guess, in disarray in regards to not just sport, but in business and in life. So I guess when you've got to pull back from your training schedule and you've got to rearrange a schedule, that's a small price to pay for, I guess, people's lives, because there are a lot of people who are out there suffering from illness and also their livelihoods in regards to their businesses. So yes, it was hard. It was hard for the athletes to try and keep them motivated and keep working during that time off. However, we've been able to cope, fortunately, and I've had to provide them with a little of not just physical training, but also that mental side as well. Is that, you will be okay. You're not the only person who's experiencing this sort of disruption, and to sort of keep your eye on the prize, because there will be another race one day, there will be another competition, and you just have to be patient.
Do you think that Tokyo 2021 is going to go ahead?
I do think so. I think it's going to look very different from Olympic Games in the past. I don't think that they will have crowds. I do think it's going to come at a big sacrifice for athletes and coaches, because athletes are going to have to go into certain bubbles to be able to be safe themselves. They may not have access to their personal coaches. They might limit the amount of people who actually are able to go to Tokyo. But I think it will go ahead. I think that they've invested too much into it to not let it go ahead. They just really have to be smart in the way in which they get athletes and personnel in and out of the country. So it's going to be an interesting situation. COVID doesn't seem to be getting better anytime soon, but yeah, it's, I guess, up in the air.
I wanted to ask you before we finish up today as well, Paul, about athletics in general. We've seen some extraordinary athletic performances over the last 12 months across the world in different disciplines, and I'm talking about Eliud Kipchoge running sub 2 hours in a marathon, talking about the amazing feats in the 5,000 metres for men and women that we've seen, and we've also seen some pretty special stuff on the track as well. Does it, as an Olympian yourself, do you also sit up and take notice of some of these amazing achievements and what's going on in athletics around the world?
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big sports fan. I follow many different sports, not just track and field, and yeah, I enjoy watching new world records and feats that haven't been achieved before. I mean, it's great. I get a big buzz out of it. I think it's good, and yeah, I think that if you're an aspiring athlete these days, it's great to have those sort of those levels of achievement being done, because that's, I guess, what inspires people to continue and to become better.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, listen, we've rushed through our time today. I've asked you 3 questions that you've never been asked before on an interview, so I'm pretty proud with my own achievements today. But I really seriously want to thank you on a couple of notes. I want to thank you for your dedication to athletics, the great ambassador that you are for Australia in that space, and also for the work you're doing today helping young kids achieve their goals and dreams in athletics as well. Thanks very much, Paul DiBella, for coming on the Global Sports Channel today.
No problem, Mark. Thank you very much for having me.
We'll see you soon, and stay well up there in Far North Queensland.
Cheers.
There we are. Paul DiBella from Far North Queensland here in Australia, talking to us today about his amazing athletic journey to become an Australian Olympian and beyond. And isn't it great to get an insight from all these athletes and how they've moved through their careers, and also what they're doing post-career? I think that's also really interesting. Paul's doing some amazing stuff in Australia. He's got a great bunch of young kids that he's trying to help get to that elite level. So if you want to know more, check out the show notes. I've put all Paul contact details there. If you can help out any way you can, reach out to Paul and let him know that you found him via the Global Sports Channel. Now, before I conclude today, don't forget to check out our website, globalsportschannel.com. We're also on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. Tell us your comments about our shows and who you'd like to see on the show, and we'll try and make it happen for you. I'm wishing everyone now a Merry Christmas. We're at that time of the year. I hope you all stay safe, happy and prosperous over the Christmas New Year season. We'll keep going here at Global Sports Channel, and I'll be back with some more episodes soon. My name's Mark Philpott. Until then, all the best, everyone.